Hi, I'm Kimberly Lauren Riak. I appreciate the invitation to be a part of the Literary Gladiator community. I am responding to some of the questions about my background with reading, writing, and teaching specifically. I love to read. I love to write. I've always loved to read. I've always loved to write. Nobody had to tell me to read or write as a child or as an adult. I was talking about my father. He built a library for a lot of different reasons, a lot related to my love of reading, also my grandparents. And I don't think it was entirely just for me, but I also love the ocean, and it looks like a room in a cruise ship. To me, it does anyway, leaving the little window. So I have a lot of fond memories too of just studying the bookshelf there and those World Book encyclopedias. So a lot of fact-based information, you could say, as a child, but also a lot of series, like popular series of books that were around when I was a child in this life in the 80s, growing up in the 80s. But both parents were very supportive of reading. My dad once in a while would say things about, don't read so much or your eyes. He was an eye doctor. He still is an eye doctor. So I do have memories about that too. And I converted to audiobooks actually probably 2006, around that time. I got my first Kindle. So I did mix it up, a lot of audio, listening to books on, not necessarily tape at that point, and in the car. So I do enjoy reading. I did a lot of reading for work. So undergrad, I was regular education. So learning about the science and the art of reading also is very important. And learning how to teach reading is important as well. And not just reading comprehension, hearing comprehension, understanding the words that you're reading. The context is very important. I've talked a lot about how with technology we lose some of that, especially if you can't hear somebody's voice. You don't know all the time how they feel, like what's their expression. 90% of communication is actually nonverbal. So it's very important to have a face there to be able to read those facial gestures and other nonverbal communicative factors that go along with language. So some of us get a sixth sense regardless, but some don't. So that's another thing with all this communicating online, which again, different modes of communication, different modalities. So with writing, with reading, it just depends on the function versus the form a lot of times. But I've always loved to read. I've always loved to write. I wrote my first 2 books that weren't assigned for school or any extracurricular activity when I was 8. And they were in spiral bound notebooks, but they were chapter books, and I was proud of them, and I'm still trying to find them. They're probably in my parents' attic somewhere, but I remember being very proud of myself. And I was just thinking of this because I have a 9-year-old now, and I was thinking about his writing. In school, I loved to read. I was one that I would literally read all of the assigned readings, the textbook. In college, as a student, I would just skim, and I did very well. But in college, something inside of me, I was like, I have to read everything, and I have to know exactly. I took it very seriously. I think because of the nature of the work I wanted to do, working with different populations of individuals that are vulnerable and have needs. So I did take it very seriously. They called me Joe Special Ed in undergrad because I was like a nerd, but I thought I was a cool nerd, and I took it very seriously, and all through all of my other school. So, and for the first time, I'm still taking dance lessons. I'm a student of film, but that has been interesting too, because I've always been in school for something my entire life, traditional school. So that's been a big change. I think has led to some depression, honestly, because you're just used to the next thing. And writing, again, through the nature of my work as a teacher, lesson planning, and you're writing more like recipes almost. That's how I saw them in your lesson plans. But I took it very scientifically. So there is a science to learning, and it's very behavioral, but it's also an art. So I feel like I felt like even though I was very science minded, left brain, I always included a lot of mixed media based presentations. So whether that was working with clients specifically in various forms or in tough meetings with people and using some of the arts, definitely at the higher ed level with my graduate students, it helped keep them engaged and also helped the content seem more relatable. So I did a lot of video modeling there as well, but I don't think video modeling is the end all be all. You have to actually do it to know and understand. It's to know and be able to. So you could know a lot of information, but if you can't actually apply it, what do you actually know? What have you actually done? So we do look at observably what you've done. So, and that was even as a teacher, this student will know and be able to, as far as how we would even write goals and objectives. So I did a lot of that kind of writing, a lot of researching, a lot of plans, a lot of for meetings, for my courses, content, syllabi, read a lot of graduate papers, wrote a lot of graduate papers, and then a lot of research task forces and teams and research and development within my company, my main company especially. That was a huge focus. And then at the higher ed level where you have to publish and our students have to do that as part of their course preparation programs, course sequence analysis. I also wrote for pleasure, pseudo pleasure. It was more like we would say behaviorally, to behavior maintained by automatic negative reinforcement. You don't necessarily need an audience there, but to get rid of the pent up, I went to counseling for personal things most of my adult life, but I didn't talk a ton about work because I really couldn't. I talked to my kids sometimes about, I wouldn't always give the full details, and I talked to them more about other kids and things, that they might relate to, but I couldn't really talk a lot outside of with some peers and coworkers. And sometimes the nature of the work can be daunting, and you can get depressed because of that as well. So I felt like it was a creative outlet for me to also process. And recently I had a client say she was doing that, and it made me realize I think that's what I was doing too. So writing can be very cathartic for sure. Journaling, people do that. I didn't see them as journals, they're real books, but also you can kind of reframe events too. So even if it didn't end positively, it could have a positive ending, or if it was a do-over, this is what I would have hoped might have happened in another situation, possibly. So I do enjoy reading. I do enjoy writing. I also enjoy conversing, dialogue, the interaction in general. I started my little podcast show, vlog, I called it at first, instead of a blog, a vlog. And that got mixed reviews at first. People weren't sure exactly where I was going with that. But I looked at that as content also, and it was also functional because it was helping redirect people back for services. And I did it at a time, it just made sense. A lot of questions, frequently asked questions, and made it more like a Dear Abby kind of a thing. This is a big focus for me right now, social media detox, and I tried to warn them about my concerns with it. I did it more to compartmentalize again, and I was so busy with working that it was like, okay, maybe this will save some time too. But it became like a job where if you don't like somebody's photo, they take offense to it. I looked at it like, I always said, it's like the 4 minutes in between classes, and I'm like darting to my next meeting, and but then people, it's not a replacement for communication. And some people, I think it is truly just a way for them to document. So I thought, well, I could have photos there too that I can just look at then. They don't have they didn't at that time, the little slideshow option like my share site did. I know my sister's profile, she should have stock in Facebook. Nobody has contributed to Facebook as much as my sister has. But I feel like at a time where there's a lot of everybody on their phones and building these apps, I love books. So this local bookshop, bookshop.org, I discovered, I don't even remember how or through who, it made me really excited because it's once again more of a balanced approach where they're supporting local independent bookstores, so you can purchase the book online, have your little affiliate link set up, other people could purchase through you, and a portion of the proceeds also goes to supporting local independent bookstores in 3D. Who doesn't love a great bookstore? I love them. I wish I had one closer. I remember a great metaphysical bookstore when I was in college that I was obsessed with. There's another good one in Peddler's Village, and I used to find them on trips all the time. I just really like a 3D book, and I think from having a dad that's an eye doctor, he made me a little paranoid about all this reading. Like, you're not supposed to sit close to a TV. And here I was teaching a lot in person, then I was slowly but surely moving to more online instruction just because I taught grad students, and it's mostly at night after work. And once my children were in school, I never would have seen them. So I was slowly but surely also making sure that I was going to be able to see them, and got the coursework online when I was still a student in my first doc program, which I was very excited about that prospect. But I didn't, again, it shows I grew up with a dad, don't sit close to the TV, but I didn't generalize like clearly that would be the same problem with a computer screen until he finally said something. I was like, oh, duh. So I have these eye conditions, which are definitely from that. So I would caution everybody, wear the blue light glasses that I'm not wearing right now. These are what you want to read with if you're reading online. But get the books. It's great to just curl up with a book. And I love to read. And I'm excited to talk with this group about the things that you're reading and writing and doing. I've also helped with legislation. Only one personal piece of legislation, despite the reports and everything else. But I'm big on triangulation, not in a bad way. The way some people will, in the counseling and clinical realms of some of my former practice areas, it could be bad when you're triangulating or like manipulating. But in research, triangulation is a very good thing. You're trying to find correspondence between like intersecting points where there's, there's a match in terms of, according to this source, and this source, like a nice triangle. And it just helps with the validity and reliability of the findings. So that's a positive definition for triangulation if it's in the research realm. So I looked for the overlap in terms of legislation, and I got a little borderline obsessed with trying to find where laws could match what we, the experts, science says. And then also, if I could find it in a movie that already existed, even better. If I couldn't, just some way to make it more translatable for people so it's more like Og Lindsley, I always think of him with plain English. So people could you could write research that could be read, and so you could speak in a way that people would actually understand what you're saying or even care to know. Like, I get all these tech updates, and honestly, I used to care, but I just didn't have the time for them, honestly, at that time. And now it's like, I just am so tech phobic, and I have such tech trauma that I can't. So I can understand if, like, some people, it's just not an interest area, or they have their preconceived notions or ideas. But if you really could learn ways that would help everyone involved understand, whether it's in healthcare or education or just how you relate to others or get along with others and be a little more reflective in your interactions, I think that books could be a good way. Just like I used to think that other forms of communication, if you can't get along in person, maybe that's the way to do it. Everybody can get along in a literature review. According to this one postulates, this one argues. So at least they could all be present, like a conversation in 2D that way, in a book or in a article, or maybe in a movie one day. And it may be asynchronous, but it's a revisionary process. So I'm hoping that through this group, I do miss my little book clubs, and I miss talking to real people in like present with me here, where we can talk about the content and having those meetings to look forward to and process the content together and sharing information together. So I'm excited, and hopefully this is the right group for that.